All right, today we're going to talk about meat care and really why we go spend all the time in the field. It's fun to kill elk, but bringing back the groceries is the main point, and bringing back and maximizing all the meat you can out of killing that elk. And so the big thing, is just being cognitive when you walk up on a bull. Like, what's the plan? We use the gutless method. It seems to be the cleanest, easiest, most efficient way to get all the meat off the elk. And we usually take it off in the quarters at the time, and we like to keep those quarters contained and hanging. If we have to bone out for packing, if we're packing a long ways, we will, but we try our best to keep those quarters in the whole state, just as they are, rear quarter, front shoulder, and then all that loose meat will go into a bag. But the biggest thing, skinning, is just being cognitive. When you're skinning that elk, we start on the back. And generally we try to run with the hair. Instead of cutting against the grain of the hair, a lot of times you can cut hair and have that land on your meat. We just want to try to minimize that. So if you cut with the grain of the hair, so start up in the neck, come down. It's a little bit harder to start up in that neck because that hide's really thick up there. If you need to, you can kind of start lower and then work your way back up the neck. But just trying to be really cognitive of how you're approaching that. Don't ever, when you're skinning, cut through the hair into the hide, come from the hide on the underside up. That will kind of help on the whole, keeping that minimized hair landing on the meat. And so we'll split at the back, and then we work our way down. A lot of times on the back quarter, I'll run skin up, and we'll cover all that in our gutless method, but just be real careful of how you approach it. So go through that skinning method, like I said, coming from the inside versus trying to cut through the hair down approach. And when you do it, on that gutless method, you're going to take that rear quarter off. You'll have, lay that meat bag out. We made a zippered bag specifically for this purpose, especially if you're by yourself trying to load meat in an awkward quarter bag or a pillowcase old style bag. Can be pretty challenging. So unfold that thing, you can lay it down, and we'll usually, like if you're taking a quarter, you'll be on the back side of that, lay it. Just be careful on the dirt, needles, pine needles, fir needles, ferns, anything like that, leaves. Keep that bag clean, keep the meat clean. You'll take that quarter off, drop it in that bag, and instantly zip that thing up. The cool thing there is when you're taking care of that animal, try to find a shady spot close by that's got a branch on it. Take that meat bag and hang that up. And the biggest thing, you try to get that airflow on it. So in a cool shaded place with a breeze is preferred method on hanging. And if that's just right there at the kill site, great. And when you're transporting back to your main camp, trying to be in a shaded place, dry, all those contaminants where water can grow bacteria, flies blow, so you want really good quality meat bags to take care of that meat. So get that meat hung up, get it in a shaded spot, get air on it. What you want to do is get that crust. You can use citric acid. I've used it before. There's like a powder form that you can buy, add water to if you were really concerned about it, but that's something that over the years we just haven't done much. But get it hanging. You want the hard crust to develop on that meat, and that will kind of secure everything in there. And with high temperatures, that's when, the debate of do you got to get this into a meat locker? Do you, and all this kind of goes into is if you double lung that thing and it dies instantly, and within an hour you've got that thing starting to butcher and taking care of it, you buy a little bit more time. If that bull, if you made a bad shot and you had to let it sit overnight, the first thing that's going to spoil on an elk is going to be in the rear quarters, down in the ball joint. That's going to be where the heat is trapped in. But the big thing is getting that hide off as soon as you can. But you can, too, if you're concerned about that, you can cut that down without ruining any of your cuts. Same go like when you're going to bone that, take your meat section of wherever that bottom round is, anything like that, and get it down to that bone on the rear quarter, lay that thing open, and those bags are big enough you can kind of lay it open and get that heat out of that bone, because that bone's going to get where you get bone sour. So that's really something to pay attention, especially if you had that bull set overnight. and it's been 8 hours, 10 hours since you shot it, that's right on the point where you're going to start getting some meat loss and some spoilage. The other thing that you're going to get meat loss and spoilage out of is bloodshot. So if you shoot them through the shoulder and there's a bunch of bloodshot, trim all that bloodshot away. You don't want that with your good meat. You want to get that off immediately. So when you're taking care of it, butchering it, trim that bloodshot out. If you've got a spot where that arrow went through, cut a hole around that. Make sure if you broke an arrow, you don't want any of that carbon fiber floating around in the meat either. So take care of that. Bloodshot, bone sour is the other one. And then, I've heard some people like, oh, I want to get it cooled down, and I dropped it in the creek. That's where you can get bacteria to grow when you have moisture on the meat. So it's not something we'd recommend. I've heard of people doing a plastic bag trick and in the creek, but it's not something I've personally done. I run a little nervous on that because getting a tiny little hole and all of a sudden exposing meat to that water and then growing bacteria, it's definitely something you don't want to do. But once you get them all in those bags and you're going to go pack it out, sometimes you'll see us in videos, we'll use a plastic bag to put in our packs. And we use that for a very short time. And that's just to kind of keep the blood contained so our packs aren't so bloody, especially in bear country or, where we've got a month left of season, we're not going to be able to get those bags clean. But we only use it when we're packing that short, the hike out back to the truck or back to camp. And then once we hang it again, you pull those bags off and let the meat bag material do its basically protection of flies, bees, anything like that, dirt, fir needles, trying to keep that meat clean. So let that bag do the work. Picking a good spot for at camp location. Like I said, if there's a creek nearby, that's going to be your best. That's always going to be, several degrees cooler. Trying to keep it in the shade is another one, and keep it dry. If you're in rainy conditions, we've definitely used Tyvek tarps, or if you got a little sil nylon tarp, build a little meat shelter overhead that's going to protect the rainfall from coming down on that meat, or we've used fir browse or something like that. But again, in a well ventilated area, you want shade and air. Those are going to keep that meat protected and good. And we've hung elk for as long as 7 to 8 days back in the backcountry or at a base camp. As long as you get the critical point is getting that initial cool down. So that first night when you get temps down in the 40s, that's kind of where I look at it. If you're getting lows in the 50s, you need to get that thing to town, get it in a locker. If you're getting temps down in the low 40s or in the 30s, that's where you're gonna, that meat, even if it comes up in temperature in 70 in the day, it's still gonna be cold and you're not gonna lose meat as long as you keep, like I said, the sun off of it, keep air on it. I'm gonna drive those home. Those are the two really critical important, and then keeping it dry. So once you get that initial crust, that first 24 hours, that's the first 12 hours getting that crust on it, that's that critical point. But when in doubt, if you can and you have the time, get it to a locker, get it taken care of. You don't have to worry about something coming into your camp. Bears, this case, last year we had wolves come visit our camp. Luckily they didn't do any damage to it. But so you got this bull taken care of, you've driven out from Pennsylvania, you're out in Colorado, or maybe you're hunting Wyoming, you're from Oregon. Taking care of that meat from the point of the kill to get it home, that you want to pay attention there. If you get to camp, don't just throw it in a cooler. That's where you can actually mold will grow where it's dark, so you can get mold to grow on it. You don't get that air circulation. The only time you want to use that cooler is when you're actually transporting it from point A to point B. And I've also we've used dry ice before, we've used block ice. The thing there to be really careful on dry ice, you can burn that outside crust. You want to keep a barrier, like a paper barrier or anything like that. If you're using block ice, you want to keep something where the quarter's not sitting on that block ice to get that moisture. Again, that moisture is where you're going to get bacteria growth. And then, when you get it home, process it efficiently in time manner. You don't really get any extended breakdowns of meat hanging, so we try to process them quicker than not, or take it to a locker, or even have it processed when you're out of town on an out-of-state hunt. Find a good meat processor, do your research beforehand, know where they're at, making arrangements. A lot of those guys that time of year, you call up at, hey, I killed a bull, they'll meet you there late at night or early in the morning. And a lot of times you're limited time on how and when they can get that thing cut up, but it's nice to have that cut up, frozen, and then in a cooler on the drive home, already processed, taken care of. But if you don't have that courtesy, like I said, you can use block ice in a cooler, dry ice as well. You just got to be careful of it doesn't burn that skin to make that transport home. But using good meat bags, like I said, you invest in so much time and money and bow and gear and all that. Don't let the flies get to your meat. Don't let the dirt get on your meat, and don't let moisture get on your meat. Those are the three things that are going to spoil your meat. So hopefully all this info kind of helps you out, and good luck next fall when you're out there trying to kill a bull of your own.
No worries over nickels and dimes, or a 9-to-5 grind. I gotta get loose sometimes. In trouble